Join us again today as we talk about a movie-related topic. Uh, we'll get into it here in a second. So, join us today. Welcome back to all you who've been here before, and welcome to all you new folks who've somehow found joy here. Today, we are going to be discussing a movie-related topic, which we'll get to here in just a moment. Obviously, you haven't seen him here before on the channel. This is my nephew, Brandon. You probably saw the video with his younger brother, Levi. And this is obviously his older brother. He's here from San Diego, come to visit. And going to be in one, maybe two videos. We'll see how it goes.
Probably two.
Yeah. Hopefully this one won't screw up and we'll actually get it online. Well, that's what happened with one of the ones with Levi. The camera kept trying to autofocus on something, and so I couldn't use it.
Oh, no.
So, sorry, Levi. That's why only one of the videos of you ended up on there. But anyway, we're going to be talking about... Well, this is going to be a far-reaching topic, potentially. It could go a lot of places. But essentially, the core is our movies, and by extension, shows, books, etc. Are they truly worse today than they have been in the past? Or is it just that they're different? Is it that older people like me, and I'm not that old, but I'm old enough for this to start happening, are just too set in our ways, and new stuff's all like, oh, that's scary, I don't like it, So that's one reason why I wanted a younger perspective on this. Also, Brandon is a film aficionado like myself, so...
Fellow cinema lover,
yes,
indeed.
So he would also have a more broad perspective on the topic, so...
But I would like to say I am no expert in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't claim to be one either.
Yeah.
I think I occasionally get propped up on the pedestal, but I'm not the one putting myself up there. I don't think. I don't know. Maybe let me know in the comments. So anyway, I'm going to throw out part of my feelings, my thesis, I guess, on the topic. And then we'll let Brandon take over, and then we'll discuss. So I do feel that there has been a slippage in quality. I think it's for a number of reasons, and I'm going to try to go over them. And as in our other videos, I'm going to attempt to avoid overtly political topics here.
Understandably.
Although this is Hollywood, and part of it has to do a little bit with that, but not so much which side of the political divide we're talking about. So try to keep that in mind as I try to keep this as apolitical as possible. So I feel part of the reason is that just in general, ever since probably the late 70s, early 80s, the studios have become far less about art, assuming they ever were purely about art, but they've definitely become less so, and are far more about the dollar. Which, it's a business, that's understandable, but when your product, in theory, requires a certain level of quality, like, you can't be cutting corners. And so I think they just make movies now, just most of them are to the lowest common denominator, where before it was some of them were, and even they seem to be better written in years past. And now it just seems like they're not even trying. It's like, just throw some special effects, some pretty ladies, and a halfway decent action star that can string together a semi-coherent sentence, lots of explosions, cut, done, release. It's like, no, like Entertainment needs to be more than that. There's plenty of room for those movies, but there needs to be other kinds of movies. And so I feel that's part of the problem. I feel that largely because of money, Hollywood plays it way too safe with like, oh, let's just buy this IP and just pump out sequels instead of let's try something new. And so you wind up with that, and that's where you wind up with a problem like the Star Wars sequels, where Disney thought, hey, this IP basically sells itself, and found out that no, it really doesn't. There is actually a little bit of effort required. You can't just put anybody behind the camera.
A little bit of talent needed.
Yeah. And to be clear, I do not fault the actors in any way, shape, or form for that. They should not get any of the hate that they get, because they shouldn't. They're not responsible.
Some of them should.
Well, like who? In the sequel trilogy.
We don't have to go there. I don't want to spread hate.
Now, like Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams, yes. Although I almost don't even fault Rian Johnson. Almost. I think that was a case of someone came to him and was like, hey man, you want to direct a Star Wars movie? And I tell you what, I know I'm in no way qualified to direct a Star Wars movie. And if someone came to me and was like, you want to direct a Star Wars movie? Hell yes, I do. Sign me up. It'll be terrible, but I'll have directed a Star Wars movie. And that's more than 99% of the people on the planet can say. So hell yes, I'd sign up for that. So I personally think there's a real chance Rian Johnson, bit off more than he could chew and didn't realize it. J.J. Abrams, on the other hand, has been around the block. The man made did he make all 3 of the new Star Trek movies? Or just the first 2? I think he made all 3 of them, didn't he?
I really couldn't tell you.
I know he for sure made the first 2. And he's got lots of TV credits. He's made some other movies. And it's not that he makes bad movies. Like The Force Awakens, all things considered, divorce it from the original trilogy and everything, it's an okay movie. It's watchable.
It is watchable.
But it sets up all kinds of potential places to go, and then Rian Johnson is like, and now I'm going to burn all those places down. And they're like, okay, JJ, I left you no story room. Good luck on part 3. So, and the bad part is, if they just gave Rian Johnson, if they were like, look, make a Star Wars movie off over here where none of the other movies take place or anything, I'd watch it. Okay? Because I liked Knives Out. I liked Looper. I think he directed Brick. I liked it. But yeah, he's directed decent movies. It's just he can't be the middle guy on the trilogy that everything has to depend on. And so, but those decisions all flow from the top, which for those of you that have followed Star Wars for the last several years know that that's Kathleen Kennedy, which is a paradox because she's also the same one as sure, make Rogue One, which was the best movie Disney's made from the Star Wars franchise, or the TV shows, which aside from about half of the Book of Boba Fett have been good. The Mandalorian was good. Andor's been great so far. And I don't get it. I don't know how the same studio is taking the same franchise in just 2 bizarrely different directions. Or the fact that they can look to see how to make success work by looking within their own studio at the MCU. The blueprint is right there. And that comes down to incompetence at the end of the day.
On what level? The studio level?
That's at the somewhere in the executive level.
The executive level.
It's that either you probably, because obviously I'm not sitting in the board meetings, you probably either have Kathleen Kennedy or someone right at that level of the orbit is sitting there saying, I want to put my stamp on the property. And so they're only pushing things that are related, trying to push things related to the sequel trilogy, because that's all new, that's all Disney. And keep trying to push that, and then you've got other voices that are like, hey, the original trilogy was worth a ton of money, maybe we should make some shows back there. and someone's like, yeah, fine, whatever, and then they manage to work, you know, and it could be that, like the CEO is like, hey, we have this Disney Plus thing, we need to make some Star Wars shows, and so someone like Kathleen Kennedy is like, okay, fine, just green lights the shows without looking to see what they are. That's possible, and I say that because I think it's Solo got three-fourths of the way through production before they stopped, and I think brought in Ron Howard to redo like half the movie because they were finally like, no, this isn't going to work. Like, that doesn't happen to some place that's credibly run. Okay, and this is Disney. This is the juggernaut
This
in
is
Hollywood.
the juggernaut. And I mean, they're going to follow the money too. And then as consumers of this product, we're kind of leading the way a little bit, I think, because our opinions, our voices, are what we watch is apparent to them, and they're going to follow that. So if we go and see the Force Awakens and make them all types of money for the Force Awakens, they're going to make more.
Right, and that's one of the other problems, in my opinion, in Hollywood is that I have no idea what the decision makers actually think. I only know what they say in public. And if what they say in public is what they actually think, they're mostly fools. Because none of them seem to be able to know how to actually read success and failure correctly. Like, whenever Solo didn't do so hot, immediately they were like, oh, so is this the end of white male led Star Wars? And no one was like, guys, we can't help but notice The Last Jedi got an awful lot of hate online, and a lot of people said we're done with Star Wars, and then we released this movie and it didn't do great. Maybe those two events are related, because that would be admitting failure, which they can't do. So they don't want to look at what the usual reason for failure is, because Solo didn't tank because of the lead or because of anything like that. If it tanked for any reason of its own, it's because literally no one was asking for the movie. I have no idea who was like, man, we need a Solo movie. I thought it was okay. Donald Glover was great as young Lando Calrissian, and I hope we see more of him in that role. But, if anything, it's like, who wanted this movie? But on the flip side, you could argue the same about Rogue One. And a lot of people consider Rogue One to be the best of the Disney Star Wars movies. So, but you have things like that, and you're going to start having that in the MCU also. And they're going to try to find something else to blame other than degrading quality or literally attacking the fans. Like, that's one of the other parts of the problem here is Hollywood, ever since the 2016 Ghostbusters movie, has been given an out to ever be accountable for anything. If a movie fails, attack the fans. Like in any other business, that's insanity. You don't attack your customer base.
Sure.
And I have no idea how Hollywood keeps getting by with it, and I have no idea these people that white knight online for Hollywood. Like, I'm not going to simp for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Like, they can afford their own PR.
In the case of Ghostbusters, right, 2016, what was the hate there on the fans?
Okay, so supposedly, now I'm 100% positive there were legitimate people online probably saying misogynistic things because it's an all-female cast.
Sure, and the fact that it didn't do well.
And well, this is before it came out. And I believe Leslie Jones probably did receive some actual racist comments because she's African American. But I also believe that's probably like 1% of everything. And they focused on that like a laser because they knew they could turn public opinion on that. Whereas the rest of them were like, your movie looks stupid. You know, and I didn't watch it because it looked stupid. And
I've never seen it as well.
And I've even talked to other people that I thought would give it a go, and several of them women, to be clear, and even they were like, no, this looks stupid.
Yeah, they just said it was trash.
So I do plan on watching it someday because I do want to actually know I'm curious. I just haven't gotten around to doing it.
Yeah. I'll get around to it one of these days.
But uh, it allowed them to turn the criticism back on the fans, and the internet being what it is, and Twitter at the time being what it was, allowed people to be like, "Oh, we've got to get those evil racists and misogynists out of the fan base." And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're talking about a handful of comments, and you're trying to paint all criticism of like that. So, like right now, there's a new Black Panther movie in theaters, and similar to Captain Marvel in the first Black Panther movie, I'm sure there are legitimate criticisms of the movie. I haven't seen the second Black Panther movie yet. I've seen the other two. They had legitimate criticisms, and they have nothing to do with sexism or racism. So, but the problem is the studios will use that as a defense. And so incredibly cynical people believe that, now they intentionally uh, race and gender swap characters to have a built-in defense because they know their product is not good. So I don't know. I'm not that cynical. I'm not a Hollywood producer who does a mountain of cocaine every day. So I don't know, but that's what they do.
We don't have that luxury.
I don't know if I consider it a luxury. Well, I mean, I guess it would be a luxury because it's a really expensive hobby, but yeah, I guess. So anyway, I think it's a bunch of things like that. I also think that they try to go too far with their messaging, and writers in the past knew how to hide the message behind a compelling story. Current writers don't understand that. They look at older stories like, oh, look at the message, and I think that's all there is to it because they're dumb and they can't write very well.
And they just kind of don't respect the consumer. Like,
oh no, these people have no respect for the consumer.
No.
So, and that's I think that's a lot of the problems that lead to movies just not being as good. And it also comes through in shows and books and other things as well. But and it doesn't matter if we're talking right or left leaning messages. If all you've got is the message, like people just don't like being preached to.
Exactly. Nobody likes to be preached to, but you need to have a good story too. I think the writers have lost a little bit of their auteur when it comes to that, especially with big studios. I feel like they take away from the artist a little bit.
Yeah, that's definitely been in decline since the late '70s, early '80s.
Yeah,
when that seems to be when everyone agrees that like the inmates were definitely running the asylum at that point. But that's when you had people like Kubrick and early Spielberg and Lucas just going and doing their thing.
And you were talking about message, and people don't want to be preached to. And just look at Kubrick's The Shining. Yeah, so we were talking about messages being delivered in the right way, and just brute force telling the audience what you want to say is not the best way to do it, in my opinion. I think that Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is the perfect example for that. And there are many other ones, but
I have one in mind as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, there's endless amounts, and that's why we all love cinemas, because we see these. And anyways, I was just gonna say, there are ways to deliver a message that is better, that in my opinion has been better in the past than it is now, like what it's turning into. I think that like modern cinema is taking a certain direction, and that may or may not be true, but and it's with different studios too, because I mean, if you look at Disney, you have the executive pulling the director in a certain way. But if you look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino, I feel like he wanted to make a movie and send a message to Hollywood, and he did just that. And I feel like some directors and some artists still have the power to do that, just like Stanley Kubrick and Spielberg.
Yeah, I think there's fewer of those people now.
I do think that, yeah.
It's basically as your Tarantino, your Spielberg.
Well, fewer people who have the power to do that now. There's many up and coming directors that want to be in this realm, but just do not have the clout yet, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I know my go-to example is Star Trek Six, uh, and you need a little bit of history from the Star Trek series to understand this because people today, if you're a younger person, you just watch the Star Trek original series, you might not understand that a lot of it is supposed to be an allegory for the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union.
I know you're gonna hate me, but I've never seen Star Trek.
I'm not going to hate you. That can be fixed. So this is an ignorance versus stupidity issue. Ignorance can be cured. That's just lack of knowledge. That's not an insult. Stupidity cannot be cured. That's permanent. That is an insult. Uh,
So
but
harsh,
that's what understanding what words actually mean can do for one.
Yep.
But anyway, so the war between the Federation and the Klingons is meant to be a Cold War in space, essentially. If you pay attention to the episodes, they very rarely actually fight. It's a lot of jockeying for position and trying to get planets to align with them versus the other side, trying to build a coalition because they think there is an inevitable war, similar to the Cold War, And so that's what it's kind of built on. Well, in Star Trek Six, which was released in the early '90s, the there's a moon around the Klingon homeworld called Praxis that explodes, and it's where they mine dilithium, which is what they need that's what powers all the starships. And so, because of this, the homeworld has been like poisoned with radiation, and so their only hope of survival is basically to turn to the Federation, sue for peace, and ask for help to move everyone off the Klingon homeworld. Okay, so just by itself, if you know nothing else about the Star Trek franchise, this is just kind of like the end point of the Klingon Federation War. But if you know about what the real world events at the time were, you can see that this is meant to be a representation of the end of the Cold War, because you have Praxis, the big energy source explodes, just like Chernobyl going nuclear. They have to sue for peace. Well, whenever Chernobyl did that, they finally allowed certain Westerners in to the other side of the Iron Curtain. And that was one of the kind of like the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union things. They had to sue for peace. They had to start withdrawing their troops from Afghanistan in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So the Klingons had to like start retracting to use their resources to deal with the problem. And two enemies ultimately came together in something resembling peace. But you also had other things like Kirk had to decide, can I give up this grudge that I've had my entire adult life, particularly for Kirk because Klingons did kill his son. And so for him, there's a whole other like subplot of, he hates all of the Klingons because of this. And he has to finally, confront like, is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Like, he killed the one Klingon that was responsible. Are the rest condemned to die just because of that? And Kirk, early on in the movie, even says that. Like, I think Spock's the one that asks him, like, should they all die? And he even says, yes, they should. And so throughout the movie, he has to overcome that. And so it's about burying old hatreds and, again, it's the parable theme of the Cold War. But if you don't know all that, it's still an entertaining movie about essentially the end of the original Star Trek story.
But once you find out about that, it makes it so much more interesting. It adds so much to it.
Right. Yeah. Because the writers understood how to put a message into the movie, but still just make an entertaining movie that's not beating you over the head with the message.
Sure.
Because again, people don't like being preached to. So that's why that one's my go-to example.
And I think like that underlining theme of the Cold War, I think it's grounded in reality. And I think such an abstract idea such as Star Trek, having that base, I think it adds a lot to the viewing.
Well, I've
never seen it, but
that's why science fiction is known for doing that, because there's a long history in science fiction. You take aliens and alien cultures, and you make them similar but not quite the same as certain human cultures. Yeah. And then you have humans meet up with them, and then the critique is, seeing this from an outside observer, there's enough distance that you're not directly critiquing the real human culture, but as long as you can read beneath the surface, you can see that's what they're really saying.
Yeah.
And that's what sci-fi allows people to do. And like the original Star Trek and Star Trek: The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and probably Voyager have a lot of that. The newer shows, though, are essentially like, you know, they just come straight out right at it, and it's like, hold up, like you're in like the 23rd century, like supposedly you've solved all these problems. They don't exist in your timeline. Why are you preaching about them? And that's the problem with the newer Trek shows. That and there's a major structural problem with Discovery, but that's very briefly. The problem is the main character, at least for the first two seasons, because I haven't bothered to watch the last two yet, isn't the captain. Okay, well, just from a purely plotting perspective, the only reason we care about anything is because of friction, because of drama. Well, if the main character is not the captain, who's the friction going to be with?
Sure.
The captain. Well, in any military organization, like you get enough of that, you're in the brig or you're out. Like the second in command can't always be right and the captain just be incompetent. That's not a winning structure for the show, but that's the way they went. And like I figured this out like in 2 episodes. I'm like, this is never going to work.
I've never seen it.
Like this character is going to have to become the captain at some point. And I assume she does, but that's going to be in season 3 or 4. So it's a huge structural flaw in the plot. That's why Kirk is the main character in the original series. Picard is the main character. That doesn't mean there aren't characters that get focus all the time. Like the Next Generation is more of a other characters get more focus than they did in the original series. The original series, it's basically Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and every once in a great while, like the other people do some things to make them memorable. But the other part is Spock and McCoy also represent the two halves of decision making for Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
Spock is logic and reason. McCoy is emotion, and then Kirk's the one that ultimately has to make the decisions. So whereas the Next Generation is a little bit different. Picard's the more well-rounded statesman, and the guy that's more hot-headed is the second in command.
What are the new ones called? Beyond?
No, the new series are Discovery, Picard, which takes place after the Next Generation, and then Strange New Worlds. That one follows the Enterprise, while Captain Pike was the captain. He's the one before Kirk. So I haven't watched it yet. It looked promising. I like the guy that's playing Pike. He did a real good job in Discovery. He was the highlight of Discovery season 2 easily.
Yeah.
So I do have high hopes for it. I just haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
I think it's interesting kind of looking at boot ups and remake sequels to these older movies. Like you have the original Star Wars trilogy, you have the prequels, and now you have the Disney's version, and you have the Ghostbusters remake, you have Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. It's interesting to look at the quality of the first series and compare that to the newer ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, like with The Hobbit, as I understand it, what happened was they were like, well, Lord of the Rings was massively successful. Like, let's make some more movies. Like, okay, well, like,
but then it was just a cash grab.
And then it's like, okay, and then I think even Peter Jackson was like, we can do it in like 2 movies.
Yeah, so we were comparing older generation movies to reboots or remakes, etc. And The Hobbit versus Lord of the Rings, I think that the Lord of the Rings had so much success because it was such a genuine, unique. It's based off the novels, but it's an original story and it's a good one, And I feel like The Hobbit was mostly a cash grab. And I'm going to be honest with you, I only watched the first one. I didn't have enough respect for The Hobbit to watch the other 2. I really didn't.
For whatever it's worth, I would watch them. They're not terrible, but that's not great praise considering the other 3 are spectacular.
Yeah. Like one of the best trilogies ever made.
Yeah.
If not the best.
Yeah, as I understand it, what happened was like even this, like Peter Jackson's like, guys, there's like two movies here, maybe, and they were like, yeah, but you made a trilogy out of the other three, and he's like, because there were three books.
Yeah.
The Hobbit is the shortest of the books.
Yeah.
Like this is going to take some real stretching.
And there's another problem because I mean, you look at Game of Thrones, right? The writers just ran out of material to film with. You know, they started writing their own material, and that's why it just went downhill after season 5.
Yeah. Yeah, and they may never have that other material because it seems like old George R.R. Martin's just like, I don't know. I'm just gonna coast until I die. I forget writing that last book. Like I'll let someone do it from my notes, like Frank Herbert with the Dune novels after I die. But
speaking of Dune, you know, I mean, like you look at the first who directed the first Dune? Not the TV show, the actual movie.
Hold on, are we talking the movie from the 80s?
Yes, the movie from the 80s.
Okay, so funny story. The movie from the 80s is one where
Yeah, so if you're wondering why I look like this now, it's because it's freezing in this studio. Back to you, Bob.
So to answer the question as we were in the middle of the 80s movie, if you actually look at the director credit on most copies of the movie, it will actually say Alan Smithee.
Never heard of him.
Alan Smithee has directed all kinds of movies. He has a tremendous list of credits.
Name one.
Well, Dune.
Oh, okay.
However, the thing is, Alan Smithee is a pseudonym. That's a name directors put on movies whenever they don't want their real name on the movie.
So Alien 3.
No, I thought his name was on there.
Oh, his name's on there.
It's Darren Aronofsky, right?
I don't even know now.
Well, anyway, yeah. So Alan Smithee is the name that's listed on there, but obviously that's a fake name. The actual director was, and I'm trying to think about this since you asked me the question. I'm trying to stall for time here.
I can't think of his name either for some reason. David
Lynch.
David Lynch. Yep.
Yeah.
David Lynch.
Because studio interference kind of screwed some things, and so eventually he was like, "I don't want my name on this thing."
Well, I think he wanted to make it like originally a 5-hour movie or 2 movies.
Well, no, he didn't. The guy before him did. The guy before him was a guy, Jodorowsky. Jodorowsky. He's a Mexican gentleman, I believe. I watched a lengthy documentary on this. I believe he's Mexican. And yeah, he just had all kinds of insane ideas. This movie was going to be some like 5-hour epic.
It should have been.
He had gotten several bands to commit to music. Like each faction was going to have a band do their music, and I mean like Pink Floyd, The Who, I think, several other bands like that, and it was going to be just insane. And I remember who he had playing the Emperor. He finally got him to commit to it, Salvador Dali. And because Salvador Dali kept coming back like with these insane demands, and finally he was like, "I want this much per day," and he's like, "All right," because he figured out they could shoot all of his scenes in one day if they did it right.
Wait, like the artist Salvador Dali?
Yes, the artist Salvador Dali.
I didn't know that.
Was going to play.
I didn't know that was the Emperor.
He was going to not in the movie we have, but he was going to play the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV.
Huh.
However, in my opinion, a potential runner-up for crazy casting, we're going to get Christopher Walken playing him in the sequel to Dune.
Really?
The new version.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Christopher Walken's eccentric.
Yeah. And I also think the new Dune, Denis Villeneuve, is that right? Denis Villeneuve? Yeah, sure. I think he's one of those artists nowadays, one of those directors who's really made a name for himself. He cares about making movies and he cares about making good movies and writing good stories.
Yeah, I do feel like he's one of the current bright spots in Hollywood.
I agree.
Who's definitely counter to what we've kind of been talking about here.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's like, I don't know what studios he works with and some of these directors work with, but I know that, bigger studios take that away. They take away agency of their directors. And I feel like they don't give them creative freedom. And if you just give that to these people who want to make, their own art piece, it's yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the new Dune, and I'm looking forward to the sequel.
I enjoyed the new Dune.
I shouldn't call it a sequel. It's just part two.
It is just
it's
part
two of the first book.
Yeah.
So, I thought most of the casting was good. Um, there was one just random race and gender swap that I still don't understand, but the problem is it's a character that causes a domino effect because they have offspring and whatnot, and it's just one of those like I just don't get it, and it also per certain aspects of the story it doesn't make sense from the book either. But a lot of the characters in the movie, it's open-ended as to their origins. So, like, you could have done it with lots of other characters. It was Liet Kynes. In the book, is a guy, an Imperial. So, well, it's literally he's white. Okay. Whereas in the movie, it's a woman of African descent. And because of the way...
Oh, is that's the girl who like messes with the wetsuits?
Yeah, it was supposed to be the judge of the change.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if
he reads the books, I don't.
And if I recall correctly, there's something to do with the way men and women, their particular roles then from in society, that would make them less likely to back her as a warrior. If I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I've read the book, and I'm having to go off of what someone else told me recently that seemed to jive with what I recall from the book, but I could be wrong on this part. But that's the only one that I can think of in the entire movie, and it just seems so random.
Yeah.
And I again, I don't know why, because like the Fremen, you can make them anything, because they're not native to Arrakis. So, because you had some people like, well, clearly they should all be, like Middle Eastern. It's like, well, no, they're not native. There's no one's native to Arrakis. So they're people that came there at some point in the past, and among an insular population, evolution is not going to make them different, unless you're talking over the course of like tens of thousands of years, and that time scale has not passed in the Dune universe. Mm-hmm. So if they were a bunch of pasty white people, they're going to be a bunch of pasty white people. I mean, they're going to be sunburned now, but if it's a bunch of African people, Asian people, whatever, that's what they would still be. Intermingled because of interbred and everything, but so you could make them anything, because I'm pretty sure the books don't actually describe anything to them.
And I think that's what they did, right?
Yeah, I think they are a mix.
Yeah,
because you've got because you've got the guy that Paul has to fight. He's clearly black.
At the end?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that fight scene, I'm not going to lie.
But then Stilgar is Javier Bardem.
Oh, yeah.
And then Chani is Zendaya. So, I mean, you got a mix there, which is probably accurate to the way the book was, to the way it's supposed to be, from the way Frank Herbert envisioned it. Because they're not a race, they're not a people as such. Mm-hmm. Little spoiler alert for later videos, folks, just in case you think you're rooting for the good guys. They're religious fanatics, and they'll bring their holy jihad across the universe and kill millions of people. So that's a little spoiler alert for those of you who haven't read the other books. Part of the whole point of the books is don't worship heroes. They're not what they're cracked up to be. So, yeah. So for those of you who are like, man, Paul's an awesome guy, like, just wait.
Yeah, and I've seen interviews with Denis Villeneuve, and he said, he took straight from the source. Whenever they had a question about anything, any direction to go, they just opened up the books.
Yeah, and I mean, and then that's such a minor thing. And I want to be crystal clear, folks. Like whenever I say things about like this, that's not something that I'm like, oh, I'm not going to go watch the movie because of that. I'm going to, it's like no, it's a matter of I prefer things to stick to the source material,
Mhm.
and even then, there's like tiers to it for me. My number one is comic books because it's a visual medium. You're used to seeing how things look.
Yeah.
In a book, it's all in your head. Okay, like I couldn't read the first Dune book without picturing the characters from David Lynch's Dune. Like when I'm reading about Gurney Halleck, it's Patrick Stewart. And just because that was what I was used to. Like I couldn't vision anyone else.
Yeah, and I feel like you really can't do anything other than the source material unless you're, a master class like Kubrick.
Yeah, well,
You
and
know,
that's kind of the thing is like Kubrick is one of those, Kubrick, Spielberg, people like that. They're people that know the rules, know why they exist, and because of that, they know when and how they can break them
mm,
and still make things work.
mm,
And you see that same thing in music and elsewhere. Like
sure.
you have to understand not just the how but the why, and that's why their imitators never succeed because they only see the surface. Uh, like I said, I love movies, but I'm not a director. And I would occasionally read about like some concept in movies, and I wish I could remember what this one's called. But it has to do with perspective. And there's two characters on screen together, and typically they're depicted almost kind of like we are right now in a lot of scenes, or it's one here and one here, so that you never see them together. But something to do with the orientation, and Kubrick screws with it a lot in The Shining,
Mm,
particularly the bathroom scene whenever Grady's like cleaning the stuff off.
yeah.
Something to do with the way they're aligned.
Oh
I don't,
yeah.
I don't remember the explanation for it, but
It's the 100 or it's the 180 rule or something. It's like the 180-degree action line. You're not supposed to cross, and he crosses it multiple times in that scene.
yeah. And so, but
It disorients the
yeah,
viewer.
but
Yeah.
that's because Kubrick understands why the rule exists,
Mhm.
so he understands what will happen when he breaks it.
Another perfect example of that rule being broken is in Quentin Tarantino's *Inglourious Basterds*, the opening scene, where they're sitting at the table. It's same ordeal. He broke that rule, the 180-degree line, and it disorients the viewer. But it's done in such a way where it's it's so master class. And that's the only term that I can think of it. Like it's done so well that it's very effective.
Yeah. I do wonder. Do you think he's really going to stick with his?
I hope
I'm
not.
only going to make X number of movies because what he's got like one left.
He's got one left.
I was really hoping he was going to make that R-rated Star Trek movie. I'm not going to lie. Like I'm still hope that's not going to happen. But God, I wish it would.
I really, really hope he's lying. Like he said either he's going to make 10 movies or he's going to stop making movies when he hits 60 years old, whichever one comes first. And he's already 60. But he's talking about making like a Kill Bill 3 or something.
Yeah, I've heard him talk about that. Like several years later, Vernita Green's daughter
Yep.
comes back,
Yep.
and
I mean, I don't know how legit that plan is, but I really hope he does at least one more movie, if not more.
yeah. I mean, I like all those movies. So
Yeah. And he's the perfect example of a director who's also, creating genuine, original stories that are.
I was gonna say I've seen some interviews with him where I think sometimes it's less like I know the rules, I'm going to break them, and more like I want to see this in a movie and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because the way he talks is like, you don't know how to make a good movie, picture it in your head, make it happen.
Yep.
And so for him, I think it's possibly less like it's like I want this to happen. And he's like, and no one's going to stop me. So
Yeah.
And
that, I mean, we need more of that. I think I feel like more of that would be good, and we need to have studios put money into these projects, into these directors, and let them just do their thing, because like that's what you get. You get *Inglourious Basterds*, you get *Django Unchained*, you get *The Shining*. That's what you get.
And I think we had briefly talked about this topic yesterday, and actually I guess it was early this morning, but Yeah, because I mentioned that like people like Martin Scorsese have had very negative comments about the MCU, and like from a creative standpoint, I do get it. You know, as much as I love the MCU movies, you know, there's only a couple of them that I would rank above average. Like, okay, no, I'd probably put them above average, but not super highly above average. Okay, there's only a couple that I actually put like up into genuine good movie territory, like all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Mainly the Winter Soldier.
Never seen it. I want to be honest with you. Captain America is my least favorite Marvel character. I know. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that, but he's my least favorite.
No, people don't like him,
No.
and I get it, and I think that's mainly because they haven't watched the movies, because they think like they see the exterior, and it's like, oh yeah, the uber patriot, and they don't realize that in the first movie, yes, during World War II,
mm-hmm.
but once he wakes up in the present, Cap kind of realizes that somewhere along the way, the American ideal went off the rails, and he's not loyal to the government. He's loyal to the idea,
mm.
and so because of that, like he's willing to tell the government to stick it where the sun don't shine, and is willing to fight for the people. Because as far as he's concerned, America is the people, not the bureaucrats. And so in the Winter Soldier, that's where you find out Bucky's not dead, and he's but also you find out that Shield has been compromised very thoroughly by Hydra. That after World War II, they infiltrated Shield, and they've been like running like a background thing the whole time underneath everyone's nose. Mm. And so Nick Fury had these like super helicarriers designed that had weapon systems that could basically take out anybody. And Cap's even like, I don't know, Nick, like, this seems like a really bad idea. Like, and Nick's like, why? He goes, well, whose hand's on the button? And he's like, well, mine. He goes, yeah, but what happens if it's not? You know?
Yeah.
And you find out, well, it's not. Like, Hydra's hands is the one on the button.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's an overarching theme of, like, you can't trust a giant government monopoly. You know? Like, there's more to the movie than superheroics.
Yeah.
And that's why, to me, that one in particular is elevated above most of the others. You know, because the others have lessons. Life lessons. Or like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where you could have someone who's not biologically your dad, but is more your dad than your biological dad.
Sure.
Like there's plenty of people in that situation.
Sure.
Or that two people like Gamora and Nebula, in what amounts to, from their perspective, an abusive relationship, can become combative purely for survival and not realize that the other one's in the exact same position.
Yeah.
Things like that. Or even in Infinity War, realizing that Nebula's wrong and no, Thanos genuinely does love her as a daughter. It's just the way he shows it is horrific. But he genuinely does love her. He genuinely did want her to succeed him.
Sure.
And well, he got the Soul Stone, didn't he? I mean,
yeah.
The universe agrees with him. That's what I'm saying. Like there's some hard lessons in some of these movies, but generally speaking, it's still all comic booky stuff. That one was like, no, this one's not too far off the potential reservation here. And that's why I think Captain America works a little bit better than some of the other characters, because he's basically just like, in most of his storylines, half the time he's just like a super spy, because he's almost human and just has that like unwavering moral center, and doesn't matter who's on the other side. If it's the government, then it's the government. Mm-hmm. If it's Hydra, it's Hydra. So that's why I think you should watch it. You should give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot off of that. I'll take your word for it.
And yeah, I mean that's because I never read a bunch of Captain America comics until the Winter Soldier story arc. I read that and I was like, this is actually really damn good. And the movie's close. The movie, they had it so that Hydra had him instead of the Russians. I mean, it's the Russian offshoot of Hydra, but in the comics, it's purely the Soviets, not Hydra. They had nothing to do with it. But since they already had Hydra set up, they're like, well, so. But yeah, like most of the rest of the MCU movies, they're great comic book movies, but there's limitations because of that, in my opinion.
Sure.
So I get Scorsese's criticism because none of them hold a candle to, like The Departed or any other Scorsese's work, because that's,
Wait, no. Yeah, that's Memento. Nolan.
no, that's Scorsese.
Yeah.
But Christopher Nolan's one of those types that, like, you on the one hand, he makes comic book movies with the Batman movies, but then he also makes Inception and Memento and like the other movies that everyone's like, let's have more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though sometimes it's like Christopher Nolan's just spinning his wheels to look smart, but
like Tenet.
Yes, like Tenet. And I like Tenet, folks.
I like Tenet
I watch
too.
it.
Yeah.
But like I'm going to sit down one of these days and like actually map some things out because I'm pretty sure parts of it don't work. But but I didn't want to give myself a migraine trying to figure it out. So
I like Tenet. It's just the exposition problem. It's noticeable once you watch it more than once. Even the first viewing, it gets a little bit.
It's got some things in common with Inception that it's like, all right, so now let's all have the characters go and do some like things that only rich people can go do while they talk about the plot in some setting like Ibiza or something. Yeah. It's like, okay, Christopher Nolan, we get that you have a huge budget, but like these people be like down at the Waffle House talking about this stuff in like real life here. Like, let's get real for a moment.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he'll jump from comic book movie to what he, I feel like are his more passionate movies.
Yeah.
But even The Dark Knight, I mean, that was.
Yeah, I mean, even there was like he was trying to do something beyond just the comic book movies. Like
yes.
like Batman Begins is prototypical comic movie.
Mm-hmm.
The Dark Knight.
And the way it was executed, that contrast between the Joker and Batman, like I don't think it's ever been done on that scale before. Before The Dark Knight.
Yeah, the Dark Knight, and I know the third one gets flack, but I think the third one also, it's obvious they plan on using the Joker again, and then when Heath Ledger died, they had to change their plan. So they went with, okay, well, let's just use the rest of the League of Assassins. League of Shadows for the movie. So yeah, unfortunately, I knew the moment Maria Cotillard was cast that she was Talia. Like, there was no doubt in my mind. I was like, she is definitely Talia. And then, like, once they mentioned Bane and everything else, I was like, yep, it's got to be her. So, yeah, at the end of the movie, no, it wasn't even the end of the movie. I first saw it at a showing where they showed the other two first. And that's how I knew, as in the, whenever Bruce goes to the dinner she's putting on, she says something right there. It has to do with, she talks about bringing balance to the earth. And I'm like, yep, just like your dad, huh? Yep, you're Italian. I know you are. This will not be a surprise at the end of the movie when it comes out. And she's like, oh, yep, there we go.
Yeah, every time I think of The Dark Knight Rises, shout out to College Humor for their fantastic skits.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Now, sad to say, I actually didn't believe Liam Neeson was Ra's al Ghul. Like the first several times I watched Batman Begins.
Yeah.
Because I thought what they were saying was that he was pretending that Ra's al Ghul was killed in the beginning, that he was Ken Watanabe's character, and now Liam Neeson was pretending to be him. I thought that's what they were saying. And it wasn't until I had the movie on in the background somewhere and I could only hear it and I wasn't watching it that it all clicked. I was like, no, he's saying that Ken Watanabe was the pretender and Liam Neeson's the real guy. Like, yes, that makes so much more sense than what I thought.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, what a dumbass. How did I ever think that?
Oh, yeah, I remember Little Joffrey, too. Batman Begins.
Oh, yeah. The kid on the fire escape. Yeah.
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 But yeah, Christopher Nolan is just, he's one of those directors, and I think he's one of the best working today, in my opinion, even with Tenet. Tenet has its problems, but
like the protagonist not having a real name, just the protagonist.
Yeah. But I think
that's Denzel Washington's son, isn't it? That guy.
Is it?
I'm pretty sure it is.
I
I'll double check it if you continue with your thought.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure it is.
That would be a surprise to me. I didn't know that. But yeah, you know, like, and I think they're comparable to old time directors too. I mean, you got Spielberg, Kubrick, even, you know, going way back to Hitchcock. You know, I think that as the times change, the movies are going to change as well, and technology as well. You know, we have different ways to make these movies, and I think that the newer directors, Christopher Nolan, Tarantino, I'm blanking on everybody else, but
So, any other thoughts here in the closing ramble? Now we've gone on for like probably an hour and a half at this point, Brandon.
I feel like you know, being a younger cinema goer, cinema lover, I do see the not the fall, but you know, the deterioration of some quality in you know, definitely the studios and cinema itself. But I think that the soul is still there, if that makes sense. I think that we do have some people, some artists, some directors who are willing to take steps in the right direction to make cinema what it's supposed to be, and that's, you know, an art form. And I mean, we can find examples all day of the bad and the good. And same with older movies, you know.
Yeah, right. Folks, just to be clear on my opening thesis, like, I'm not saying every movie right now is trash. I'm just saying I think it's weighted more towards that end than it has been in the certain eras of the past.
Sure.
There's still definitely plenty of good. You know, like we mentioned, the Dune movie.
Yeah.
It's an adaptation, but it's great. You know,
Yeah.
I thought the newer Blade Runner movie was good. I mean, you know, there's good stuff being made.
Blade Runner 2040, and that's another Denis Villeneuve film.
Yeah, it just seems like there's a lot more filler in between.
Sure. It's easy to focus on the negative, I think, but
yeah.
I think maybe we should start focusing on the positives. Because, I mean, you know, you still got, you know, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and, I don't know, old movies that aren't great. That's my younger mind for you.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Hey, I have that on VHS.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
I only ever saw the first one and then the cartoon in the 90s.
I have the second one on VHS.
Yeah. George Clooney's finest work. All right, well, if that's it, then Brandon, thanks for sitting down to chat.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to watch and be a part of Geek Cable.
Cabal. I'll explain it here in a minute. It's not cable, it's pronounced Cabal.
Okay, so Geek Cabal.
Yeah.
All right, let's run that back.
Don't worry. That'll still be on there. I won't edit that out.
Okay, perfect.
So,
just let me embarrass myself.
For all you folks that somehow stuck around through all this, if
you made it to the end, thank you.
if you enjoyed, yes, thank you. If you enjoyed what you saw, hit the like, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, share it around. Let's get your comments on the topic. I think we have amply demonstrated that we do, in fact, read the comments and try to respond to them either online or in the videos. But that is kind of our main method of interaction here, since we don't live stream at the moment. That's probably a ways off, by the way.
Soon to come.
Yeah, for a given definition of soon. Between now and the heat death of the universe, probably.
Sometime between there. Yeah.
Don't know whether to be closer to now or said heat death of the universe, but, you know. Anyway, thank you for watching, and we will catch you folks later. All right. Levi?
Yeah.
Stop the recording and tell us how long it is.
That was pretty good. I feel like I didn't give my best work there.